So I read to Genesis 36:21. So I'm saying for studies of us, wow. Says this is the account of the descendants of Esau, also known as Edom. Esau married two young women from Canaan. Adah, the daughter of Elion the Hittite, and Olabama, the daughter of Anna, and the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hittite. He also married his cousin Basemath, who was the daughter of Ishmael, and the sister of Naboth. Adah gave birth to a son named Eliphaz for Esau. Basemath gave birth to a son named Rera, and Ablah gave a birth to a son named, I don't know that weird names, Joshua, Jalam, and Korah. Esau took his wives, his children, and his entire household, along with his livestock and cattle, all the wealth he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and moved away from his brother Jacob. There was not enough land to support them both, because of all the livestock and possessions they had acquired. So Esau, also known as Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. This is the count of Esau's descendants, the Edomites who lived in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife; Adah, and Rera, the son of Esau's wife, Basemath. The descendants of Eliphaz were Timon, Omar, Zipiah, and Kenaz. Temiah, the Kapigan of Esau's son Elias, gave birth to a son named Emliach. These are the descendants of Esau's wife, Adah. The descendants of Rera were Nev, and Ner, Shema, and Mizrah, and these are the descendants of Esau's wife, Basemath. Esau also had sons through Olabah, the daughter of Anna, and granddaughter of Zibeon. Their names were Jerash, Jalam, and Korah, and these are the descendants of Esau who became the leader of various clans. The descendants of Esau's older sons, Elias, became the leader of the clans of Temiah, Omar, Zipiah, Kenaz, Korah, Benamah, and Amah, and these are the clan leaders in the land of Edom, who descended from Eliphaz. All these were descendants of Esau's wife, Adah. The descendants of Esau's son Rera became the leaders of the clans of Nephin, Syria, Shema, and Mizrah. These are the clan leaders in the land of Edom, who descended from Rera, and all these were descendants of Esau's wife. It's like a lot of hard names. I cannot read them. Olabah became the leaders of the clans of Josh, Jalam, and Korah. These are the clan leaders who descended from Esau's wife. Omliah, the daughter of Anna. These are the clans descended from Esau, also known as Edom, identified by the clan leaders. Original peoples of Edom. These are the names of the tribes that descended from Seir, the Horite, and they lived in the land of Edom. Lodambal, Libya, Anan, Dishan, Isaiah, Dishan. These were the Horite clan leaders. The descendants of Seir lived in the land of Edom. I don't understand how to say these weird names. The descendants of Bunah, Ohara, and Haran. The descendants of Dishan were Hebron, Ishah, Elia, and Karan. The descendants of Israel were Gilead, 7 Akon, descendants of Dishan were Er and Iran. So these were the leaders of Harat clans, Otan, Sharia, Levian, Anna, Dishan, Azar. After their clan leaders who lived in the land of Seir. These are the kings who ruled in the land of Edom before any king ruled over the Israelites. Bela son of Beer, who ruled in Edom from the city of Gibeon. When Bela died, Joab son of Zerah from Bozrah became king in his place. When Joab died, Hushan from the land of the Temites became in his place. When Husband died, Hadad son of Balaam became king in his place and ruled from the city of Ibiath, and he was the one who defeated the Midianites in the land of Moab. I don't know, these crazy names are like frustrating. When Hadad died, Samaria, the city of Masar, became king in his place. When Samar died, Shah from the city of Rabia on the river became king in his place. When Shora died, Balaam son of Barakah became king in his place. When Akah son of Ekah died, Hadad became king in his place and ruled from the city of Par, his wife was Madama, the daughter of Mecha, and the granddaughters of Merhab. These are the names of the leaders of the clans descended from Esra who lived in a place named for them. Timah, I don't know how to say these freaking names. Or Oblia, Allah, Pana. Freaking crap. So this is chapter Genesis 36, the descendants of Jacob's brother Esau. Chapter 46 is devoted to the descendants of Esau who dwell in the land of Edom southeast of the Dead Sea. The genealogy represents the fulfillment of the promise that Esau would be the head of a nation. In verse 24, Anna found water, hot spring. Genesis 36, verse 41 and 43. Moses, the author of Genesis, knew the divine revelation that Israel would eventually have a king, as 7 generations of the ungodly line of Cain were given in chapter 4. So even generations of kings in the ungodly line of Esau are mentioned here in verse 33, verse 39. 7, the number of completeness, probably indicates the entire land. Not one of Esau's descendants is mentioned in God's registry of the faithful. All are lost in the obscurity of those who depart from the living God. They had temporary riches in the passing fame of this world, but nothing for eternity. Joseph 37, Genesis 37. Joseph dreams. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a farmer. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father, wives Bella and Zilpah, but Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his older children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. And one night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We are out in the field trying out bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, so you think that you will be king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bow low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers. But his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that, he asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flock at Shechem. And when they had been going for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready and I will send you to them. I'm ready to go, Joseph replied. Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Then come back and bring me a report. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. And when he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. What are you looking for? He asked. I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph replied. Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep? Yes, the man told him. They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. Joseph sold them into slavery. Genesis chapter 37, verse 18. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance as he approached, and they made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Let's not kill him, he said. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into the empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him. Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing, and then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty, there was no water in it. And then just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a carving of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and peppermint ridden from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brothers? We have to cover up the crime instead of hurting him. Let's sell him to those Ishmaelites traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midian traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them. out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. Sometime later, Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the cistern, and when he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief. Then he went back to his brothers and lamented. "The boy is gone. What will I do now?" Then the brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood, and they sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message: "Look at what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son?" Their father recognized it immediately. "Yes," he said, "it is my son's robe. A wild animal must have been eating him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces." And then Jacob tore his clothes and dressed himself in burlap, and he mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused. Genesis 37, verse 19-20. Could jealousy ever make you feel like killing someone? Before saying, "No way," look at what happened in this story. Joseph's 10 brothers were willing to kill him because of his status of the favorite son. Their deep jealousy had grown into ugly rage, blinding them completely to what was right. Our reasons for jealousy can seem to make sense, but if we're not careful, jealousy grows quickly and leads to serious sins. The longer you let jealousy feelings stick around, the harder it is to get rid of them. The time to deal with jealousy is when you notice yourself keeping score of what others have. Genesis 37, verse 29-30. So Reuben returned to the pit to find Joseph, but his brother was gone, and his first response, in fact, was, "What is going to happen to Joe? What was going to happen to me?" rather than "What is going to happen to Joseph?" In a tough situation, what's your first concern? Consider the person most affected by the problem, and you will be more likely to find a solution for it. So the commentary says Joseph sold into slavery. Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, verse 1, verse 17. The words, "This is the history of Jacob," seem abrupt. Jacob's history, chapters 25-35, is interrupted by the generations of Esau, chapter 36. Then continue from chapter 37 to the end of the book with emphasis on Jacob's son Joseph. Joseph is one of the most beautiful types, symbols of the Lord Jesus Christ. In the Old Testament, though the Bible never labels him as a type, A.W. Pink lists 101 correspondences between Joseph and Jesus, and Ada Haberson lists 121. For example, Joseph was loved by his father. He rebuked the sin of his brothers. He was hated by his brothers and sold into the hands of his enemies, and he was punished unjustly. He was exalted and became the savior of the world, for all the world had to come to him for bread. He received a gentle bride during his rejection and by his breathing. The tunic of many colors, or a long robe with sleeves, The RSV was a sign of his father's special affection. It stirred up the jealous hatred of his brothers. In Joseph's first dream, 11 sheaves of grain bowed down to the 12th sheaf of prophecy that his brothers would one day bow down to him. In the next dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to Joseph. The sun and moon represent Jacob, and Leah, Rachel had died, and the 11 stars were Joseph's brothers. Genesis 37, verse 18-28. When Joseph was sent on an errand to his brothers, they conspired to kill him. But at Reuben's suggestion, they agreed to cast him into a pit near Dothan. As they sat down to eat, they saw a company of Ishmaelites bound for Egypt, and at Judah's suggestion, decided to sell him. In this passage, the Ishmaelites are also called Midianites, as in Judges 8, verse 22, verse 24. As the Midianite traders passed by, Joseph's brothers brought Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the traders. Genesis chapter 37, verse 29, verse 36. Reuben was absent when all this was taking place, and when he returned, he was terrified, since he would be responsible to explain to Joseph's absence to his father. So the brothers dipped Joseph's tunic in the blood of goat, and they cautiously returned it to Jacob, who naturally assumed that Joseph had been killed. Jacob had once deceived his father with a goat, using the skin to impersonate his brother's hairy arms. In Genesis chapter 27, verse 16-23, and now he himself has cruelly deceived by the blood of a goat on Joseph's coat. The pain of deceit is learned once again. The Midianites unwittingly fulfilled God's purposes by proving free transportation for Joseph to Egypt and selling him to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. Thus God makes man's wrath to praise him, and what will not praise him, he restrains. See Psalm 76:10. Genesis 38, Judah and Tamar. So about this time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hira, and there he saw a Canaanite woman, a daughter of Shua, and he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy Ira. And then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And when she gave birth to a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living at Kizavim. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son, Ira, to marry a young woman named Tamar. But Ira was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Ira's brother Onan, "Go marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother." But Odin was not willing to have a child who would not be his own here. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, then prevented her from having a child that belonged to his brother. Or the Lord considered it evil for Odin to deny a child to his dead brother. So the Lord took Odin's life too. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Judah is old enough to marry you." But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Judah would also die like his two brothers. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. Some years later, Judah's wife died, and after the time of mourning over the time the mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hara the Odiyite went out to Timea to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timea to shear his sheep." Tamar was aware that Shula had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil and disguised herself. When she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of the Indian, which is on the road to Timea, Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute, since she had covered her face. So he stopped and proposing her. "Let me have sex with you," he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. "How much will you pay to have sex with me?" Tamar asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," Judah promised. "But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send a goat?" she asked. "What kind of guarantee do you want?" he replied. She answered, "Leave your identification seal and its cord and walking stick you're carrying." So Judah gave them to her, and then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterwards, she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. Later, Judah asked his friend Hera to Abner to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things he had given her as his guarantee. But Hera couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, "Where can I find a shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance of Tuamim?" "We never had a shrine prostitute here," they replied. So Hara returned to Judah and told him, "I couldn't find her anywhere." And the men of the village claimed they were never had any shrine prostitute here or there. "Then let her keep the things I gave her," Judah said. "I sent a young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. Where be the laughing stock of the village if we went back again to look for her?" Father-in-law, "The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. He's still..." Oh, never mind. I forgot this. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now because of this, she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned," Judah demanded. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. "The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these?" Judah recognized him immediately and said, "She is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah." And Judah never slept with Tamar again. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins, and while she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand. The midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, "This one came out first." But then he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother. What the midwife exclaimed, "How did you break out first?" So his name was Perez. And then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah. Hold on. So, the commentary, Judah and Tamar, chapter 38 in Genesis. The story of Judah's sin with Tamar serves to magnify the grace of God when we remember that the Lord Jesus was destined from Judah. Luke chapter 3, verse 33. Judah is one of the 5 women mentioned in the genealogy in Matthew 1. 3 of them were guilty of immorality: Tamar, Rahab, and Bathsheba. The others are Ruth, a Gentile, and Mary, a godly virgin. Pink notes deeper meaning to the story of moral affair. Genesis 37 closes with an account of Jacob's sons selling their brother Joseph unto the Midianites, and they in turn selling him into Egypt. This speaks in type of Christ being rejected by Israel and delivered unto the Gentiles. From the time that the Jewish leaders were delivered the Messiah into the hands of Pilate, they have as a nation had no further dealings with him, and God too has turned from them to the Gentiles. Hence it is that there is an important turn in our type at the stage Joseph is now seen in the hands of the Gentiles. But before we are told what happened to Joseph in Egypt, the Holy Spirit traces for us in typical outline the history of the Jews. While the anti-typical Joseph is absent from the land, it is no accident that the story of Joseph is interrupted by chapter 38. The disruption behavior of other members of Joseph's family makes his conduct, by contrast, shine like a bright light in a sordid world. Judah's first mistake was in marrying a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shurah. She bore him 3 sons, Arah, Onan, Shelah. Arah married a Canaanite woman named Tamar, but was slain by the Lord for some unspecified wickedness. It was the custom at that time for a brother or other near relative to marry the widow and raise children for the one who had died. So Onan refused to do this because the first child born as a result would be the legal heir of Arah, not his own legal child. His sin was not so much sexual as it was selfish. It was not a single act, but, as the Hebrew reveals, a persistent refusal, and the refusal affected the genealogically by which Christ would inherit legal right to the throne of David. It is so displeased the Lord that he slew Onan, seeing that Judah told Tamar to return to her father's house till his first son, Shelah, was of marriageable age. Actually, this was just a diversionary tactic. He didn't want Shelah to marry Tamar at all. He had already lost 2 sons and considered her an unlucky woman. Genesis 38, verse 12-23. When Shelah grew up and Judah did not arrange his marriage to Tamar, she decided to hook up Judah. She decided to hook Judah by laying a trap. She dressed as a harlot and sat in an open place on the road to Timea, where Judah was going to join his sheep shearers. And sure enough, he went in and had a late relationship with her, not knowing it was his own daughter-in-law. The agreed fee was a young goat from the flock, but until he could send it to her, the harlot demanded Judah send a cord and staff. The cord may have been a string by which the seal ring was suspended, and when Judah tried to deliver the kid and have the pledges returned, he couldn't find the harlot. Genesis 48:24-26. 3 months later, Tamar was accused of playing the harlot because she, the widow, was with child. Judah ordered her to be burned. At this point, she returned the pledges with the announcement that their owner was the father of her expected child. They furnished positive proof that Judah had had sex with her. Walter C. Wright described the scene vividly. The commanders of Judah bring him word that his daughter-in-law Tamar was played the harlot. His judgment is quick and decisive. Her to be burned. There is neither hesitation nor compromise. As the others is fearful scientist, we cannot detect even a tremor in his voice. The Israelites' society must be preserved from such folly and wickedness. The word goes out. The day is fixed. The preparations go forward. The stake is planted. The power is arranged. The procession forms. The crowd gathers, and the woman walks to her apparent doom. But she bears in her hands the tokens. The pledges are with her. She carries the staff and the ring. And the staff is the staff of Judah, and the ring is his ring. The pledges become the accusation of her judge. What weight will his sentence have not? Genesis 38:27-30. And when Tamar was given birth and a baby's hand emerged, the Midianite wife tied a scarlet thread on it, thinking that it would be born first. But the hand withdrew, and another baby was the first to come. Fourth, she named the firstborn Perez, breakthrough. In the other Zerah, both twins are mentioned in Matthew 1:3. Through the Messianic line goes through Perez. Zerah was an ancestor of Achan. Joshua 7:1. It is simply astonishing common Thomas that God could take up the threads of this very tangled skin and weave them into his own pattern. Judah's marriage to the Canaanite woman in verse 2 was a first step in the intermingling of God's people with a race that was proverbial for its gross immorality. Israel would become contaminated by the unspeakable ornaments of lewd nature worship. God is a God of separation, and when we fraternize with the world, we pay an awful price. So write that down. I have a look. Tractor ride. So we're at Genesis 39. So we read this little article in the Bible first. It's like a little lesson thing. It says, what now? Setbacks. It says, Tamara and Jamie spent weeks working on their English project. Finally, they pulled everything together and made what Tamara thought was a fantastic poster. And when Tamara walked into English class on their presentation day, she couldn't believe her eyes. Jamie looked horrified. My little brother got into my room and colored the poster. Jamie whispered, I'm so sorry. Tamara was close to tears. They couldn't turn into a scribbled-up poster. What do you think Tamara should do? Genesis 39, verse 19-23 tells how Joseph handled a major setback. As a prisoner and slave, Joseph could have believed that his situation was hopeless. Instead, he did his best. His diligent and positive attitude earned him a promotion. Are you in a seemingly hopeless predicament? Yeah. I was in a hopeless predicament, being on the streets. Ask God to give you a positive attitude and help you show grace to others. So Joseph's in Potter's house now. So when Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. So the Lord was with Joseph. Even though I was going through the situation, the Lord was with him. Potiphar noticed and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. It's interesting. I wonder where my other highlighters are. So it says all his household affairs ran smoothly and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man. And Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her. Wait. "My master trusted you because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." She kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around when he went in to do his work. She goes. So when she saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men come running of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed when he heard me scream. He ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me. That's the same thing I have to go through. People talking like, she said, but when I screamed, he ran outside leaving his cloak. And then Joseph is put in prison. Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that had happened in prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. So we're gonna read the commentary now. About the commentary about where I just read in Genesis chapter 39 about Joseph, the test and triumph, chapter 39. Joseph's Lord and Savior. No, Joseph in Potter's house, 39. Genesis 39, verse 1, verse 19. The story now returns to Egypt, where Joseph was appointed overseer in the house of Potiphar, captain of the guard in Pharaoh's palace. The Lord was with him, and he became a successful man. The title in 1534 translated it was, he was a lucky fellow. Potiphar's wife tried repeatedly to seduce Joseph, but he steadfastly refused. He would not betray his master's confidence or sin against his God. One day she caught him by his garment. He squirmed out of it and fled, leaving her holding it, and he lost his coat, but saved his character and eventually gained a crown. She used the coat as evidence that Joseph had attempted to rape her. Believers are taught to flee from our fornication, idolatry, and youthful lust. Better to flee than to fall. Genesis 39:20 or 23. Without proper investigation, Joseph's master ordered him to prison. But even there, Joseph was blessed by the Lord and was given a portion of responsibility. The fact that Joseph was not executed may indicate that Potiphar did not entirely leave his wife. He couldn't help knowing her true character. The truth of Romans 8 verse 28 is wonderfully displayed in this chapter. God was working behind the scenes for Joseph. The latter resisted temptation and sought to avoid occasion for sin. Despite this, he would be seducer framed. Him. And so, for a second time, Joseph found himself in chains. Psalms 105:17 verse 19. Under the circumstances, he should have been upset, but he was not. Under the circumstances, he was above them and saw God's hand in them. His time in prison was training time for regaining time. So things that were meant by others for evil turned out to be for good. It's 105. Psalms 105 verse 17 says, "Then he sent someone to Egypt ahead of them. Joseph, who was sold as a slave, they bruised his feet with fetters and placed his neck in an iron collar. Until the time came to fulfill his dreams, the Lord tested Joseph's character. Then Pharaoh sent for him and set him free, and the ruler of the nation opened his prison door. Joseph was put in charge of all the king's household, and he became ruler over all the king's possessions. He could instruct the king's aides as he pleased and teach the king's advisors. Then Israel arrived in Egypt, and Jacob lived as a foreigner in the land of Ham. And the Lord multiplied the people of Israel until they became too mighty for their enemies." Where am I? Excuse me. So under the circumstances, he should have been upset, yeah. So now we're being Genesis chapter 40. So okay, 40, and then stop. Joseph interprets two dreams. Sometime later, Pharaoh's cupbearer and chef baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials, and he put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. While they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. "Why do you look so worried today?" he asked them. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean." "Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. "In my dream," he said, "I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand. So I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." "This is what the dream means," Joseph said. "The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place, for I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it." And when the chef baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I had a dream too. In my dream there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket containing all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head. This is what the dream means, Joseph told him. The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and apply your body on a pole. Then birds will come and peck away at your flesh. Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all his officials and staff. He summoned his chef, cupbearer, and chef baker to join the other officials, and then he restored the cupbearer to his former portion, and so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chef baker just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chef cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. So the commentary, Joseph interpreted in the butler's and baker's dream. Genesis chapter 40, verse 1, verse 19. Among Joseph's fellow prisoners there were the butler, cupbearer, and the baker of the king of Egypt. Verses 1-4. When they each had a dream, Joseph offered to interpret them. The butler's dream of the vine meant the Pharaoh would lift up his head to a portion of favor in 3 days. But the baker's dream of the 3 white cake baskets indicated that within 3 days Pharaoh would lift up off his head by hanging them. Notice that Joseph did not wait for the circumstances to change. He glorified God and served others in the circumstances. When the chef butler was released, he fell to intercede for Joseph as he had promised. But the Lord did not forget. Remember me when it is well with you. The Savior spoke similar words on the night of his betrayal, words which we can obey by taking the symbolic bread and wine. So that leaves it to the next chapter, is 41, which I'm not going to read that now. So tomorrow we can read 41, so 44. Maybe even whole chapters we can read to, like so 50.